What is up, my ninjas? I am Strydent, and welcome to my Redux of the SOTA Street Fighter 15th Anniversary action figure line. Now, I can't believe it's been 9 years since this old hoopty-ass footage. I think it was good for the time, though, still. It still stands up as far as, like, the photographs themselves. It's just the quality of the footage was bad. And at the request of subscriber Zorpox the Destroyer, I am jumping back into it, this time in glorious high definition, so that you guys can see all the details of what I consider to be the greatest 6-inch action figure line so far of all time. And, people are going to argue with me, and they've been arguing with me, and they still keep on doing their back and forth, but I have the information to back up my claim. Now, the first time around, I did a lot of comparing and a lot of bringing up all the Street Fighter figures that I have and showing you all of them side by side. And this time I'm not going to do that. This time I am strictly going to be looking at just the SOTA stuff. Just the SOTA stuff. We're going to look at it in pretty good detail. This is going to be a longer video. I want to make sure that this line gets the attention that it deserves, because as you guys know, this line was what, 2004, 2005-ish, like back then. And as you've seen now, the way that people look at toy lines, their shelf life is essentially the week that they're released, and that's it. This line stands the test of time because it does some things that, we've been wanting to see done with action figures, and that at the time it was the only one doing it. And in the years that have passed, I want to shed light on the fact that this is still one of the only lines that has done things the way that they're doing it. And when I say only one of the only lines, I mean domestic lines, meaning lines made here in the US. If you collect other lines from, abroad, then, you'll see a lot of this stuff. But we're going to look at this stuff and see just how pretty things have been with them. Just how, ahead of the curve they are. And we're going to keep in mind a bunch of things about this line that you don't typically hear whenever you do see coverage of this line. Because this is a timeless line. It follows the art, the cues of the Capcom art to a T. And I think it deserves some more attention. And just in case people forgot, I'm that guy. I'm just going to remind you and remind you and remind you. So we're going to take a big, deep look into it. All right, so why is this line special? Okay, there's a number of reasons why this line is special. You're looking at a ton of it right now. You can see that there are unique sculpts abound, and that is a big deal. But we'll start at the top. Number one, all these figures sculpted by the same guy, Jerry Macaluso. Now, Jerry Macaluso is kind of a legend when it comes to like horror and somewhat sci-fi special effects makeup and such, and sculpting. He's worked on a ton of different films. The ones you'd remember are two of the Toxic Avenger movies, the first one and the second one. He also worked on Darkman, Indian in the Cupboard, Spawn. He's just done a whole bunch. He's worked for Hasbro, Mattel, Toy Biz. He's been all over the place, but he brought a level of detail and understanding of the material that, was lacking from some of the other companies, because clearly he loved the work of Bengis, Akiman, Ideon, and Nishimura Sensei, and he put all that stuff into this line, and you could see it. You know what I mean? So it's awesome to have that as the cornerstone, the building blocks of your line, and that's what makes this work. The art direction is just so good. Now, I don't want to do a whole video on Jerry Macaluso, as even though I could. The focus here is going to be on these figures from the 15th anniversary Street Fighter line. Now, there were 4 waves, or rounds, I'm sorry, that's what they called the waves. 4 rounds, and I have all 4 right here. I only got the original variants for each of the characters with the exception of Akuma, because I wasn't really interested in the secondary colors for all the characters. But back to the point of what makes this line special. One guy sculpted all this stuff. I mean, he had his engineers and, you know, fabrication people and paint people that helped work on this as well to bring them to fruition, but one guy sculpted all of them. And like I said, he had an understanding of the artist's work and a love for that work, so much so that not only could you see his personal touches, but he made sure that he translated the two-dimensional artwork masterfully into 3D, and that's how you end up with this. And because the bones that you're working with, what you're building this on, is so varied, you end up with so many unique sculpts. Mostly, that's what makes this line so, you know, special. A lot of lines have a ton of reused parts, sometimes out of necessity if they're a smaller group or smaller company, sometimes be out of greed. You know, they're trying to make sure they maximize as much profit, so they stick with the same sculpts over and over and over and over. When you're a small company, that makes sense, but when you're a large company and you have a high budget, you can go ham and you can have unique sculpts, and that's what we need to see more of. And considering this was done back in, what was that, 2005, 2004, something like that. This is unheard of to some degree because, I mean, the toy industry wasn't where it's at right now. You know what I mean? Everybody and their mother didn't have a toy line. You had larger figures, you know, like T-Hawk I just pointed at, and smaller ones like Fei Long, and all of these figures were within the same price point because that was the price point for the line. And they're all unique sculpts. Like, in today's day and age, that shit's unheard of, and it's all because companies have started to get away with charging more and giving you less. That wasn't the case here. So while we're on the topic of unique sculpts, let's talk about true scale. All these characters had varying heights amongst them. You had the big characters, which is who you see here, and even from the smaller end, they're still huge. Musculature is huge, but the height varies, the proportions vary, and you get all the way up to your 7-inch, almost 8-inch T-Hawk, who's the biggest guy in the line. And it's quality because, you know, you want to see that variation because you had that in the game, you know? Things like varying musculature. I mean, you see that Blanka and Bison are similar in size as far as what their muscles look like and the width of their muscles, their pecs, etc. And they're still different. You look at the sculpt and the shaping of all the muscles, they're different. Roughly the same size, but the proportions of each are different. And that's what you want. You know what I mean? These are small details that go a long way. And it's strange because I've heard recent videos where the collectors are sitting there trying to shit on this stuff and say, "Oh, it looks old." And I'm like, dude, you realize that it's almost like dead on the style that you've seen in Capcom artwork. It's the style that's in the games. So for you to shit on it means you don't actually understand or like what they were bringing to the table, whereas Mr. Macaluso was actually paying attention to that when he created these sculpts. Moving on to like the middle tier of characters, the medium-sized characters. You know, your shortest dude is Gen, and your tallest of the mid-tier guys is Vega. Their musculature is all different. You know, you've got Gen, who it's mostly cloth that you're seeing. None of the musculature is pushing through his clothing. Then you've got Fei Long, who's got the more sinewy, wiry body. You know, the Bruce Lee style stuff, so his muscles are long and small. Then you've got Ryu, who's bulkier and kind of compact, but he's a little taller than Fei Long. You've got Adon, who's taller than Ryu, and he's a little bit buff, you know, in the chest area, but overall his muscles are kind of roughly the same as, you know, they're along the lines of Ryu's. You've got Remy, who's taller, and none of the musculature is popping out of his jacket, you know what I mean? So he's just lanky and tall. Then you've got Vega, who's even taller, and he's also musculature, but his biceps, triceps, etc. are all stretched because he's longer. He's got more of a lithe, almost basketball player kind of frame. And it works, you know what I mean? It all makes sense, and none of these parts are you seeing them over and over and over in these figures throughout the line. It's beautiful. All right, now let's talk about the ladies. Strangely enough, this is where the scale is a little, the heights are off. They've mixed them up. Chun-Li should be the tallest, and it should cascade down to Ibuki being the smallest. Or maybe her and Sakura being about the same height. But for some reason, they got them all flopped, you know, with Sakura being the smallest, and Chun-Li and Cammy being the same height, and then Ibuki, strangely enough, being the tall. I just don't get that. But even still, you can see them compared to the middle-sized characters. None of them are taller than Ryu, with the exception of maybe Ibuki. She's about Ryu's height, because you see the top of her head is under his hair. Her hair makes her look taller. But you know, Chun-Li's shorter than Fei Long and Ryu. Same with Cammy. Definitely Sakura. And so you've got like the different tiers of height. Even though you've got 3 tiers, you know, your small, your medium, and your larger figures, you still have varying heights amongst each of the tiers. You've got varying proportions. Now the women seem to be roughly, you know, similar in proportion. You know, no one has giant boobs or anything. You know, there's no Mai Shurinuis going on in this realm. But it's variety. You know what I'm saying? And it looks good. When you see them on the shelf, you're like, damn, they're each individual sculpts. Whether or not this line is your preference, you have to be able to acknowledge the amount of variety that is on display here. I mean, that's commendable. And one guy did all this. I can't stress that part enough. And then it brings me to the next part. These guys, as large and as small and all the different things in between, these guys were super affordable. They were roughly what Marvel Legends at the time costs, and they were anywhere from, the price. I'm sitting here acknowledging my own editing telling me where I'm supposed to be going. But these guys were roughly the same MSRP just about wherever you found them. I found them at places like Hot Topic and FYE, and they were anywhere from $15.99 to $17.99. Whenever you got them on eBay, sometimes they'd be lower or higher, but I mean, I found T-Hawk in the back of a fucking Hot Topic back in the day, and I paid, I think, $17.99 for him. It could have been $15. I can't remember, but it was roughly in that area. So these weren't even $20 yet, which is almost a shame when you think about the amount of quality, detail, paint, everything that's on display, and what you pay for figures now that don't even come close in the paint apps and in the sculpt work and articulation, you know, and points of articulation as well, because these guys also have functional articulation, whereas whatever they have works. You know what I mean? They don't have more articulation than what they need. The articulation that they have works so you can mimic what they're supposed to be like from whatever media you know them from. The very first round of the SOTA Street Fighter figures, this wave was cool because I didn't complete it when I started collecting, because I didn't start collecting this wave until wave 2 was released. And then I went back and I found all these characters. My Ryu and Sagat come from the 2-pack that was released at the end of the series, not the individual Ryu and Sagat from the initial wave. But the figures are identical. There was another version of the 2-pack that had blood all over them. And, you know, Sagat's scar was fresh. I didn't really need all that. I just wanted the basics. So, yeah, let's get into it. Ryu and Evil Ryu. So, Evil Ryu, if I remember correctly, came later, but I'm including him here because it's the same sculpt. This is dope. It's the alpha design with the red headband. What's crazy about it is that it combines 2 eras. It's the end of Alpha and the beginning of Street Fighter II. The design is still very much Street Fighter II, but you know, the ripped gi and the ripped pants legs and the larger hands and feet, that's all Alpha. So I was all about that because that's what got me super amped about, you know, this line in general. Now, as you can see, this is the alpha aesthetic 100%. That Adon and Bengus, you know, and somewhat Akiman, because he did develop a similar style to this at some point. But this is the alpha style, and it's faithfully recreated. You know, both figures, I mean, obviously it's the same sculpt, but the Evil Ryu is slightly bigger, and I don't get why he did that. But yeah, he's slightly taller. But all the details are there, all the way down to Furen Kazan on Ryu's belt. He has the old school Street Fighter and Street Fighter Alpha gloves, or Street Fighter 1, Street Fighter 2, and Street Fighter Alpha gloves. If you guys pay attention, in Street Fighter 3, his gloves were different. And then 4 and 5 is even further. But yeah, I love it. I love it. Head sculpt. You do get an extra head sculpt. It's the yelling, screaming head sculpt, which is nice. He's still got that Charlie Sheen look to me from the animated film. I think it looks better on Evil Ryu, you know, because he would be screaming. But Evil Ryu also, being that it is the same sculpt, he does still have the standard face, which looks cool, you know, like he's pondering what he just did. He comes with 2 pairs of hands, and I dig this. You have the open hands, which really work well when it comes to having him charge up the fireball. As I showed you in the Ryu, the Figuarts Ryu review, he can't do a full-on fireball. He can't do the release pose. Fists for your punches and your dragon punches and stuff like that, and it's pretty awesome. Here they are with the same heads and everything, and you can clearly see now that there is a slight height difference. It was nice getting these back when you could find these in the store. Agent O actually got me Evil Ryu for, I think it was Christmas one year. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, even the dirt that's on that figure, you see the dirt on his back and stuff, that's from being on the shelf and from, you know, being handled by everyone that sees I have Street Fighter figures, you know. And that is, I think it says murder on the back of his shirt. It's faded because it's just painted on top, but looks good, you know. It looked much better right out of the box, but you know, he honestly looks really good for, you know, a 16-year-old figure, you know. It looks really damn good. But let's get into some of his articulation. In general, he has very good basic in some areas and better than basic in others articulation. As you can see, he can assume a facsimile of his stance because he doesn't have double jointed elbows, but he has good enough articulation to do, you know, your hooks and your jabs, you know, throw punches that look pretty good and look close to what he can do in the game, which is all you needed. And again, this was 16 years ago, so we've made sizable advancements in articulation and just engineering on figures in general. But like, to see the stuff like his legs are better than a lot of the figures we get today. The range of motion in the legs, the double jointed knee, even the swivel in his feet, all of them, there's swivel in the foot. It looks really good when they're standing flat, but from certain angles, it's perfect when they're doing other things. So I think like for a Ryu figure, and if you're gonna play with him too, less is more. When they have less joints, you know, and thicker joints, they won't break if you play with them, you know, and you knock them around a little bit. When they have 50 billion joints, you know, you got swivels here and fucking, you know, double and triple jointed parts and stuff like that, then it gets a little complicated and you might end up breaking certain parts, or, you know, certain parts will get slack faster. So you don't have that here. He basically is this brick of a guy that, like, you can pose in fairly agile poses. You don't have to worry too much about, you know, I don't know, like anything breaking or moving. And even today, he's what's the word, broken in as far as like his articulation, but the joints definitely still hold. I mean, you can see all I'm using is a stand to hold his legs, and that was more so for time constraints and not so much because he can't hold the pose on his own. He can still balance on his own weight, but for the sake of time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to use my stands. But I love it. It's so easy to play with this figure. It's so easy to pose. So easy to, just fall back into kind of your big kid mode and just go off choreographing fights and things like that. And that's pretty much what I did here. I was just goofing off with them. I was gonna just put the video, record video of me having them fight, like me holding them and choreographing it. But I was like, you know what? Still pictures will tell more. You know what I mean? So let me do it that way. So I just, let them go at it, and it looks great. Looks great. I love the fact that everything I need for him to do, anything that you could think of, almost anything you could think of, that he needs to do for a good fight, you can do. And that's what Mr. Macaluso was, and his team seem to have been focused on. They want to give you something cool that you can play with, and that also will look cool on its own while standing on your shelf. And that's the problem that I talk about with like Revoltex, is sometimes they look really cool when you pose them, and they don't look as cool when they're standing still. So here you got the best of both worlds, and it's a solid figure that will stand the test of time. The materials are all on point, and I'm loving it. I'm so glad that I still have them, and as you can see, it's a masterful looking figure. M.Bison, or Vega if you're in Japan. um, this guy, got a lot to talk about with him because Bison's one of my favorite characters. I kind of didn't realize it until many years of playing this game, especially after SNK versus Capcom 1 and 2 came out. Then I realized how much I enjoy this character. And yeah, I got him twice. I had this version, and I used to have the gray and red version, which was like, I think the medium punch, or short as it used to be called, in Champion Edition and such. And I sold him for a pretty penny back in the day because I didn't really need both of them, and I was kind of low on cash. But I love the bosses, and I actually considered doing them all together. You know what I mean? Like in their own little sections, kind of separate from the waves. But I'm sticking, or the rounds. I'm sorry, but I decided to stick with each character in the round that they showed up in. And as you can see, they all look amazing together. They look like they stepped right out of the game. All the designs reference Street Fighter Alpha. That's the overall style, aesthetic that we're looking at here. And, this is Bison when he's at his peak with all the power. That's why he's fucking swole. If you pay attention, in Street Fighter II, he was smaller, which is what I like the Figure Arts version for. He's a lot, smaller than, the standard one. He's big, but he's not this big. That's supposed to be after he failed to find a new body, and he's kind of coming down off of his psycho power high. This is him with, all his powers, and I love it. Before they fucked everything up with Street Fighter 4, making the timeline so weird and stuff. But this is Bison, If you watch the 90s anime, this is Bison. If you read the comics, this is Bison. This is what we all, the true fans think of when we think of Bison, not the most recent version. And I love this. I love the look of the figure. I love the stature, and he's light on his accessories. And I will say that, like, his articulation, it's good for the time, but leaves a little bit to be desired. But look at that grin though. Shit. It's just, he's creepy looking, but he looks like he's having fun being the bad guy, and that's what you want with Bison, And this face is taken directly from Adon and Bengus's artwork. So, I know that they knew what they were doing when they did this, You can kind of do a facsimile of the Psycho Crusher. He's just not as agile as I would have liked him to be. You can also use that piece as like an uppercut, like an effect. And it works. It looks good. He's not as posable as the Storm Collectibles one that I used to have, but he is posable. And he's chunky, man. And like nothing, like that cape hasn't frayed. that's an effect piece from something else, but you can see he still looks like that should be something he would have had. But again, here's him standing next to the Figure Arts one, and you can see Figure Arts one is big, but not too big. So you can tell Street Fighter 2 versus, Street Fighter Alpha, and I like that. That's the way it should be. But yeah, this figure, it just detail out the wazoo, and I got to give him props for getting the detail on his hat and the cape, the two little buttons holding the cape onto the shoulder pads. It's just dope. All right, Chun-Li. Chun-Li, the first lady of fighting games. So, this figure is strange in a couple ways. It's a well done figure. It looks like Chun-Li, but it looks like a very young Chun-Li. It looks like Street Fighter II Chun-Li, like Champion Edition days, She's not thick. She's kind of thin, actually. But, like, the essence of the character is there. And I really, really, really dig the fact that that's the way things were done here. I'm not going to compare to the Figure Arts one. I think that's kind of unfair. Because I know when you hear people making their comparisons, they're just like, this figure's trash, blah, 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 whatever. It's a great figure. It's not bad. The posability is right where it needs to be. The sculpt is on point. She's just kind of old school Chun-Li before they figured out to make her legs be the most prominent detail on her, powerful muscular legs. But, if you like Chun-Li, this is definitely a good figure that's worth having because she can do all the Chun-Li things. Now, again, she's only limited by today's standards. For the time, she can essentially do whatever you need her to do. You know what I mean? The one missed opportunity I will say, and I still till this day don't understand why they handled this the way they did, is she does not have the peace sign hands. I'm like, of all the things you could have done, how and why would you have skipped that? You know what I mean? Like, the peace sign hands are important for that victory, but everything else you can do with her. I mean, it's funny because while I was playing with her, I never once felt like she didn't feel adequate. You know what I mean? She didn't feel like Chun-Li, but, posability wise, she's where she needs to be. Sculpt wise, she's very anime, which is nice because Street Fighter always straddled the fence between anime and comic books. And I really like the alternate head. She has fist hands, as you see here, and then the open palm hands that you see right there. So, I mean, as far as Kung Fu goes, especially her Kung Fu, those are pretty good hands to have. But, the essence of the character is there, She looks the part. I'm just surprised that they gave you the happy face for the jumping up and being happy, while winning face. But, she's very cool, very well done. A lot of character to her, even though she is on the skinny side, But typically that is anime. And if we're being fair, she does have more muscular legs in comparison to her arms. So, it's Chun-Li. Think of it as alpha. It's the beginning Chun-Li before she really started making them gains. Next up, we got Sodom. Sodom was never one of my favorite characters, but there's a little Easter egg about him that I noticed that made me actually like him more as a villain. Essentially, he's like an evil Jack Burton with an interest in Japanese culture and not Chinese culture. I noticed this because of his boots and his truck. And like there's some other Easter eggs if you pay close attention. But Jack Burton comes from Big Trouble in Little China. It's my favorite movie of all time. So this made him a kind of like a must get. Now, I like him because he's a villain, but he's dumb. He's kind of a punk. But there's like nice subtle detail here in this figure. And he's a big dude too. So it's nice to have this big dude who's not exactly slow. He's not super fast, but he's like in the middle, And he fights with a somewhat blunt weapon, which is perfect, So when you're playing with other characters that don't use weapons, the fight doesn't seem so, one-sided. And I also like the fact that he tends to grapple in the Street Fighter games, so it's nice to you know, have him in your collection. But this guy is detailed, very well, excuse me, very well detailed, and I love it. I love it. I love the fact that the paint is very well applied all throughout this character. I mean, look at that face. Look at his the gold on there, and the screen where his mouth is. You know, it actually looks like the screen. It's like that color's perfect. Now, over the years, it's rusted, but that paint is well done. You don't see it anywhere else. So yeah, this guy, he's awesome, man. Like even the soles of his geta. Well, actually, those aren't geta. Those are just sandals, rope sandals. But he is a good-looking figure. He's pretty posable, and I just dig the whole approach to this guy. He's not a poorly done figure at all. As far as accessories go, he only comes with a handful of accessories. It's kind of understandable because as a character, he doesn't really have that much that you need him to have. I mean, other than maybe the damn truck. But I mean, it was no way he was coming with the truck. But, you know, he's got his jute, he's got his fan, and he's got his hat and his, you know, like screen or robe or whatever you want to call it that's connected to it. I don't know what the Japanese name is for that combination. But the cape piece, the screen piece hangs from the hat. And, you know, that's what he has in the show, or in the game, I mean. And it looks great. I mean, over the years, it did start to fray, but it's still pretty quality as far as materials go. You know, soft goods usually fall apart real quick, and these did not disappoint. They're still pretty much here. I've cut some of the little frayed parts off so that it looks, you know, good, but you can still see where it frayed on the edges. But yeah, Sodom is another quality entry in this line. Really well done figure. He's a big dude. Not the biggest, but he's big. He's substantial, and you know, he's a good part of the collection. All right, let's talk about Sagat. This figure here is the example of why this line needs to be paid attention to. Storm Collectibles have done one, and so have Figure Arts. And while I know that they're both trying to capture a look from different games, they're still not as accurate, in my opinion, as this is. And, you know, a lot of people argue the point. They don't understand how substantial this figure is, both from a cost perspective, like value-wise, and just a quality perspective. This is the alpha rendition of Sagat. Most of these figures are. You can tell by the exaggerated proportions. This is more on model with the game. That's why there's more of a yellowish tint to the to his design. And like I said, everything's exaggerated. It's not like the, you know, the newer games where they started going for a more semi-realistic kind of look for him. Everything is more on the cartoony, you know, exaggerated anime kind of style. Like if you really, you know, and I'll put the Storm Collectibles version right next to him so you can see what I'm talking about. They went for more realistic proportions, so you can see that looks like what a real 7-foot tall muscle man would look like, as opposed to, you know, cartoony anime muscle man that we're looking at right now. So yeah, there's that. And then there's the detail of him being the second largest figure in the whole entire line. And what's amazing about this is price-wise, we didn't break the bank. You know, we didn't break the bank at all. Price-wise, he still fits in line with everyone else. And I'm going to get into more about that in a second. But you see here that the proportions fit perfectly with what we had been seeing in artwork and in the game in the past. That's why I'm not impressed when today's collectors and today's reviewers start talking about scale. They always say scale, and what they mean is they want all the figures to be within that 6-inch, you know, scale. They want them to be about that size. This figure was between 15 and 17 bucks just like all the rest of the figures, just like T-Hawk, just like everyone else. And look at how close he is to the $40 figures that we have, access to in today's market. Like, it's nuts when you think about it. Between $15.99 and $17.99, and then you think about that Spawn there. He's $20, and he's a little bigger than they are. You know what I mean? Just let it sink in. That's base level McFarlane figures are, $20. This figure is a baseline Street Fighter figure from SOTA, and it costs, between $15 and $17. That's nuts. Actually, him and T-Hawk, all the figures were in that realm. It just like, this is what we used to get. This level of quality, this substantial amount of figure. And when you feel these figures, T-Hawk especially, but Sagat's right there with him, he just feels like a lot of figure. He's kind of heavy and bulky, and kind of like when you hold the Marvel Select, well, almost any Marvel Select, but the Marvel Select Juggernaut, you hold that thing in your hands and it feels like a brick of a figure, and that's how Sagat feels. And when you have Ryu in the other hand, you see the difference in how much figure you're getting, and it's like the figure fits the role that the character fits in the game. These figures are hefty, and I love it. And you can see none of the details have been like cheapened out on. There's even that light wash for the skin tone. You can see where there's areas that have been like kind of airbrushed, it looks like, so you get like some volume to the muscles and such. It's just such a good figure, and this doesn't take anything away from other variations of Sagat. Like that Storm Collectibles one I showed you, for it's kind of like Street Fighter V / classic Sagat. It looks good. It looks really good. My son and I were like, damn, that looks good. I just don't like the hollowness of those figures. This guy's not hollow. Accessories: extra hands, extra head. Keeping it simple. I would have liked the Tiger Shot effect piece with the little stand, but you can pretend. It's a lot more fun to pretend. Detail wise, look at all the details, man. The gashes on his head, and I mean, they look good. And I'm gonna get even closer up on just the head sculpt. It's even on the alternate head too. They didn't forget about it. I would have liked it to have been sculpted, like etched in there, but hey, the paint is good and it hasn't come off since then. I mean, this figure is a great figure. He looks the part, and I love the fact that they didn't go for the full-on evil look. He just looks intimidating. And if you noticed, for those of you who were into Street Fighter, they moved away from Sagat being 100% evil and kind of went with him being a kind of disgraced champion. He fell in with bad people because of his loss to Ryu. And because he was losing his way, because he got consumed with trying to defeat Ryu, he ended up working for Shadow Law. But then, through learning about Ryu's struggles with the Dark Hado, or the Hado of murderous intent. What is it? Satsui no Hado. He kind of found his way again, and then was able to have a fight as a noble warrior. And he's like, I want to challenge you when you've gotten control of yourself fully. None of this bullshit Dark Hado nonsense. Let's have a real fight, which is cool. I mean, that's not how fights really work. But it's dope, you know what I mean? For the story that Street Fighter's trying to go for, that's dope. And I always dug the fact that he was like a big, agile character. He's the fastest big character in the game, which is pretty awesome, because Muay Thai is like that, elbows, knees, quick kicks to the shins. There's a lot of deceptive movements for Muay Thai. Agent O did Muay Thai for a while, and I did Muay Thai for a little while too. It's actually one of the first styles that I actually was trained in, and it sucked. God, it sucked. They abused the shit out of us in that. But yeah, I love this figure. This figure reminds me that like there is a better way to do large figures in a line that has varying scales. You know, you don't have to go nuts and try to overcharge people just because the heights and, you know, scales of the figures, the characters in your line happen to be different. You can still, you know, keep things at a moderate MSRP and still give people quality. Because if you notice, he doesn't have a lot of accessories because he's a big dude. He shouldn't need a whole bunch of accessories if he's going to be that big. And I love it. I got no complaints, nothing at all. All 16 years later, still awesome ass figure. All right, round 2. This was a round that was awesome for me. I mean, the whole thing was awesome for me, but it was cool because it was still in keeping with the original World Warriors and the new fighters, the new challengers, quote unquote. And also, I managed to pick up this whole wave, minus T-Hawk, at Chicago Comic Con that year. I think that was 2005 or probably 2005. That was a fun time. I picked up some other cool stuff too, but I got this wave mostly and Gouken at the con. And much like I've said in the past, I didn't break the bank getting these guys. You know, everybody was fairly reasonable. I think I paid a little bit more. I paid about $25 for Ken when everybody else was in the $15 to $17 range. And that's at a con, and they usually try to gank you at conventions. So, you know, I think if you look around enough, you find deals. At least back then, you found deals, because I'm telling you, I pretty much was making money to spend money when I was doing sketches and such. And all the money from my comic went to the comic itself. So, to the printing of the next issue. So, yeah, it was a pretty nice set of finds, especially because they were new at the time. But yeah, this was a fun wave, nice assortment of characters. Let's get into it. T-Hawk, or Thawk as we used to call him. He's probably, at the time, he was the most badass Native American in video games, period. Now it's kind of a toss-up between him and Chief Thunder from the new, I think they call him just Thunder now, from in the new Killer Instinct. But anyway, this guy was awesome because he was my introduction to this line. He was a bigger figure. The sculpt was 1,000% on point. The colors were beautiful. He came with exactly the one accessory that he needs. And I don't know, it was like everything worked, you know? All the poses I wanted to put him in, for the most part, I could do. I mean, look at the range of motion on his kicks. And it can go a little bit higher, too. He just was a beautiful figure. And that's with no stand. I don't know. Everything on this figure works for the benefit of the whole. It's a good example of taking your articulation scheme, your paint scheme, everything, the stylistic look of the figure. Because this is, I don't think at the time, and I could be wrong, actually no, I am wrong, Alpha 3 had already come out. So we had already seen what T-Hawk would look like in the Alpha style. And this is kind of like the middle ground. There's a lot of detail that's from the original artwork from, you know, Super Street Fighter II Turbo. But like overall, proportionally speaking and everything, it still fits in line with the Alpha style. I don't know. There's nothing really lacking from him. I did have a problem with him in the years to come because he kind of succumbed to extreme heat in my my apartment, and one of his hands, while like the hand you see there that's in a fist, well, the other chopping hand, that hand got stuck in there. It got soft, so when I was trying to pull it out, it broke. And yeah, that's really it. The only thing I wish he had that he doesn't have is a hand that's kind of gripping, like what Sagat had, so that he could grab people's faces when you have him doing the double tomahawk or double typhoon. I think it was called the storm hammer back in the day, but the typhoon is what they call it when he does his super. it would be awesome. But as you see here, you can see the peg, it twisted off. I couldn't tell when I was twisting it to pull it out that it was, you know, actually just twisting and breaking. It felt like it was still turning the way it's supposed to. But he is an amazing figure. There's so much just quality detail, like the little tassels on his jacket, and on his boots. Man, even his belt. Look at this belt. It literally says Hawk on the belt, and then has a tiny little, you know, hawk there. It's just, and then the little details, even the little the end of the belt. You know, the belt end had silver on it, like a little piece of metal, and the like wear and tear and designs on the leather. I mean, this figure is phenomenal, you know. And again, 16 years ago they were doing this. Meanwhile, Marvel Legends was like kind of like this level when Toy Biz was handling it. It was close, and then Hasbro shat the bed a lot, and it took them another 5 years to get back to a level that's on par with this. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. Look at the hair. That's one thing that always lacks on figures is hair, and they got it in spades. Again, the tassels, the bands around the top of his boots. I mean, it's some great detail. I did have some sticking with, like I said, I had him posed and the blue rubbed off on his bicep. But I mean, that's it. The eagle or hawk. Beautiful. This figure is just like quality, man. Quality. It's exactly what you would expect from SOTA when it comes to Street Fighter. I mean, it's all the things that we love about this line. Let's talk about Ken. This figure here was really dope because there are some elements with him that they took from Street Fighter III that help him stand apart from Ryu. Earlier I talked about Ryu's gloves, and over the course of the games, the gloves for Ryu, for all the Shotos essentially, they change. In Street Fighter 3, this glove style is what both Ken and Ryu actually had. Sean didn't have these gloves. Sean had the old school gloves. So you can see it's a glove, kind of like the MMA gloves that we wear these days. It's a glove with the wraps around the wrists and the padding on the back of the hand. He also looked different from Ryu because his gi has the sleeves removed properly. They're not just ripped off and tattered. Same goes for the pants legs. Now Ken has the same articulation as Ryu, and essentially all of the the posability that you would need to pull off Ken's crazy ass kicks that he developed over time, you can do it. Like here, he's doing that jump axe kick type deal that he had in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. I think he had it across the series from Double Impact on. It's nice. It's nice. I don't have any issues with moving him around and posing him and making him look cool. He can do all the things. He has the same limitations as Ryu because he doesn't have a butterfly joint. He can't do the fireball properly, and they both can't assume the stance perfectly, but they can assume a facsimile of the stance. You get the idea, and it looks good. For characters that were kind of created as palette swaps, there's a decent amount about these two figures that kind of set them apart, even though the base figure is the same. Again, this is an example of how you do this so it doesn't feel like your fans, the consumers, are buying the same figure over and over and over, because you'll see some of these things again with Akuma, but then again there's more stuff with Akuma that was done to separate him from these guys. Much like Ryu, Ken only came with a few accessories, and I mean they're accessories that make sense, you know what I mean? Essentially you have the alternate head, you got the extra gesturing hands, and you've got a Dragon Punch effect. And it's weird because this Dragon Punch effect, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but it's kind of not the right one. The head is essentially the head from Street Fighter Alpha, complete with the long ass ponytail hair, and it has the ribbon that becomes Ryu's headband. I like this. I'm glad they put it in here, but I don't really like that face sculpt. Maybe it's the expression. I almost wish they had swapped the expressions or made both faces similar and then had, different hair. The Dragon Punch effect. If you notice in the beginning, I didn't use this effect. This looks more like the effect in the drawings in the instruction manual when they show you what the moves look like and they're telling you how to do the moves. It's cool and all. It's a nice transparent red, but I don't really like it. It doesn't stay on the way it should, even though there's like an imprint of his fist in there. I had to use some sticky tack to keep it on. Instead, I used the fire effect that came from the WWE Create a Superstar line. This thing fits perfectly and I have no issues with it. It really makes me wish that this is what he came with to begin with, because it just looks the part. But all in all, though, Ken is pretty awesome. He does go for a pretty penny these days, but I mean, you can kind of see why. He has more personality than a lot of the other Ken figures, and he's just as capable as the other Ken figures, so you won't go wrong with this guy. Blanka. Now this is a figure that I really grew to like because I've never been a fan of the character. I'm a Brazilian American and I am not a fan of a green whatever he is, Beast Man, being our representative when we've got a handful of martial arts that you could have had on display, and we have some of the most beautiful people on the planet, and somehow we get this and everybody else gets like fairly good representations, which just always felt suspect to me. I mean, later on they'd give us Sean and what's her name, Laura, but But anyway, this figure's awesome because just like everyone else, his articulation works for the sculpt and for his size. He can do just about everything that Blanka does in the game. He looks the part, and then he's deceptively large. I expected him to kind of be like stubby legs that like are stuck in a crouching kind of position, because I mean a lot of times that's what they would do, to give you the exact form and function of the character. They would skimp somewhere, you know what I mean? Not Soda, but in a lot of action figures, that's the way they would do things. And it wasn't always a problem either. But with him, you can pretty much get him to assume all the poses you see him assume in the game, as well he should, being part of this line. And they didn't really screw up anywhere with like details. The only thing I didn't like was through several moves I had one of the little chains on his anklets, or the little like chain links, I guess, where the chain would connect, broke off, and it fell off in a box and I just never was able to find it, so I'm assuming it fell off and went where it went. But as you can see, he's pretty big, and that's not even standing up perfectly straight. And I showed you in the beginning how tall he is and where he lands in the scale hierarchy and whatnot. But musculature looks awesome. The alternate head looks awesome with his mouth all open and stuff. He looks like a beast. And again, it's like Alpha 3 had come out, so everybody was represented. So you got to see, I guess Jerry Macaluso had a good example of what these characters should look like in 3D, because the art was so good in Alpha 3. I don't know. I've always been impressed with this figure. Accessory wise, he doesn't come with very much, just an extra a set of fist hands, and he has a set of open hands, and then he has fruits and a skull. These are all from victories that he had in Alpha 3. I think they all work. There's not much more that needs to be said. They all work really well. The scale is nice, the paint is nice. Every figure feels, or every piece, I'm sorry, feels like it's part of this figure. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like anything is lacking in any way, shape, or form. And you compose him with all the things, which is the way it should be. And I just think like Blanka's an odd character, and there's a lot of people who like the weirder characters and such. And he fits. Everything fits. There's no issues with him at all, and he's easy to play with, and he feels substantial, and he looks amazing next to his fellow Street Fighters. I didn't get Dan, so you won't see Dan in this in this retrospective, so to speak, or super review. But yeah, he looks crazy. I love it. He looks really cool with Sakura. All right, now let's talk about Cammy. Now, Cammy, she was one of my favorites. Back in the day, she was actually my main for a long time. This figure is awesome because it captures the essence of what she looked like in the Super Street Fighter games. And it does take a little bit of inspiration from the 90s movies, the 90s animated movie. She looks really, really like in between that age where because she was young. I think she was like on the older end of her teens in the original game, and then they made her a little bit older as time went on. And then with Alpha, they reset everything. With Alpha, they kind of made all the dolls kind of like in their teens, and then they made Cammy kind of age up from there. We saw that in the Alpha series and X-Men versus Street Fighter and stuff. But you see all the details are here, and she looks good. Her posability is pretty nice too. And one thing that I talked about was how this line typically had like one articulation scheme across the board, and there are certain things that kind of vary from figure to figure, and Cammy's one of those characters. If you notice, larger characters had single jointed arms and double jointed knees, right? So no one loses the double jointed knees, whereas the more live and thinner characters have double jointed knees and elbows, which means all the females got double jointed elbows. And this is years before we started seeing them standard on Marvel Legends. I mean, like, Toy Biz Marvel Legends did it, and it was a standard all across the board. I think with a few exceptions, but it was standard here for the smaller characters. Face sculpt is really nice. You can tell it's an old figure. There's dust, there's wear and tear. I played with this figure. She took blows, okay? So the scar that's stock is the scar on the side of her jaw. But you see, she looks like the anime. She looks very simplistic. The shadows fall in the right spots. The eyes are the right shape. She looks like Cammy. More so Cammy from Super Street Fighter II Turbo or just Super Street Fighter II. The Delta Red symbol is still there. It's perfect. There's no issues there. She's got the elbow pad on the one elbow, and then her gauntlets look legit. With the knuckle dusters and everything. I always loved those knuckle dusters and those gauntlets that she wears. I was like, man, these look really fucking good, She's just well designed. The boots with the socks showing up right at the top of the boot itself, the boot cuff, looks great. I don't have any issues with that. Her accessories. She doesn't really come with very much. Just these, an extra head, the eyepiece, a pair of chopping hands, and the peace sign for her victory, or the victory sign, depending on what part of the globe you're from. And everything looks good. Everything looks good. Now, there's a little hole on the side of her head that is specifically there for the eyepiece. You just plug that little peg from the eyepiece into that, the hole on her side and the side of her head in her ear, and then you have her power meter reader, so she can see that Ryu and all the others are over 9,000, but she can see your power levels and shit, and looks good. The opposite or extra head has the winking face, and then she's smiling, and then you can couple that with the peace sign, and there you go. And the chopping hands, you can do a number of things, She would never probably be saluting Bison in this suit, but, that's one of the things you can do. Or you could have her in variations of her stance, several things. Chopping people, all kinds of things that you do with those hands. But it's a good looking figure that still holds up after all this time. You know, I've played with her so much. I really wanted there's a chase figure that has the design from the video game Cannon Spike. That one is more expensive, and I just could never find it. But overall, she's a beautiful figure, very well done, still holds up really well, and she's been improved upon by the Figuarts one, which I kind of refuse to put in the video just because there's such a drastic difference because of how much time is in between these two figures. All right, let's move on to Vega. Now, Vega looks really cool. He's really well done. I don't have anything bad to say about him except for I had to replace his claw. My claw, he took a tumble and the claw bent in a way and broke that I couldn't glue it. So I made kind of a bootleg claw. This was really early in customizing for me. So the claw it serves the purpose, but it's not the prettiest. So for the sake of the review, that's the claw that he's had for a number of years. That's what he's going to keep. Essentially, I made a fastened shipping needles, or what do they call those? Sailor needles, onto a piece and then glued that piece to what was left of his claw so that the peg for the claw piece still works. But you can see just about everything that you know of Vega, from the pretty face, you know, the unmasked pretty face, to the claw and the rose, it's all here. If I remember correctly, I don't even think the Figuarts one came with the rose. I could be wrong. He probably did. It's been a while since I've looked at his the Figuarts one's accessories, but dude's really posable, well painted. It doesn't matter what color scheme you get. I always opted for the player one, you know, the standard color scheme. Everything just works. He doesn't look cheesy. It's a good looking figure. The articulation allows for him to do a lot. The accessories, he's just got a few accessories: the extra hands, the rose, the claw, and the alternate head. The accessories make sense for who he is, you know, and that's always going to be a big strength of this line, is that the accessories work for the characters. So the hands are really well done, and they're very well engineered. That pinky finger is what holds the rose. You pretty much just slide the rose itself into the pinky, and it makes it look like he's holding it in that fanciful kind of way that he does. The face, it's a masculine shape with some feminine features, like a very American style Bishoujo face. The tattoo is really well done. It's not an accessory, but I felt like highlighting that. Well done, with both the color and black line work going all the way around the figure. And it's just really well done. He's really reminiscent of the way that he looked in the Alpha series, which is a beautiful and awesome look. The mask itself, really well done, really simple. It gets the point across without going overboard, and it feels like what you saw in the game jumping off the screen. Whereas the newer one, it kind of goes a little bit further, and it cleans up. It's sharp and clean in comparison. But overall, I mean, this is Vega. There's just no mistaking who you're looking at. He's agile, he's posable. You can do all the things with him, and that's what you want from a character as dynamic and, you know, cool as Vega, you know? Now, round 3. It is a special wave for me because it contains my favorite Street Fighter character, probably of all time. And all these characters were characters I never thought we would see so soon. But let's get it started with my boy, the man, William F. Guile. I love this character. The fact that he harkens back to old action heroes from our 80s action movies and everything. The fact that the figure itself captures that Dolph Lundgren-y kind of look that he has, as well as a big, you know, muscular physique, but a very still agile physique. You know, he's kind of like Scott Adkins as Boyka, you know, who would also probably be the perfect Guile if they were to do him in live action, which they were at one point in time, but that seems to have faded off into nothing. But everything you need to make him do, he can do. And he looks great standing still, but he gets really awesome and dynamic looking when you put him up in cool poses and stuff. And I dig that. That's the whole point of this line in general, is what they're supposed to do, they can do. This dude has a very small amount of accessories, but you can kind of relive all the things, and there's not much to Guile. There's just him and the loss of his partner, Charlie. Two of them were special forces operatives that worked together. Charlie was killed by Bison on a secret mission to destroy Bison's psycho drive. Anyway, here's what he comes with. You got the sonic boom effects. You've got 3 extra hands, and another head sculpt, so that you can have him kind of looking like he's in an intense battle or something, I really dig the hands. 2 of the hands you have to use together, and that's to comb his hair, which looks dope. The comb is stuck in his hand. You can't do anything with that. But you can use the other hand to kind of beckon people to come on, see if they want to attack you. And then, of course, you have the... that looks so good. Then you have the thumbs down or thumbs up hands. I love these because it's very simple. And it was one of his victories when they redid his sprite in the Alpha series. I think that was in Alpha 3. And it just looks legit. It looks right. It doesn't look like a weird set of hands. It works. And then the last one is kind of an accessory that I gave to him because it's fitting. So technically, Guile should be wearing either 2 pairs of dog tags or just 1 set of dog tags, which would be Charlie's dog tags. So, that this is like the big part of his defining character, either as a result of his battle with Bison in the end of Alpha 3, when he was kind of reintroduced into the canon, or if you played Street Fighter II instead, when he fought, he got bigger, got better at fighting, and then went up against Bison in that story. And it's usually I have him wearing those other dog tags, but for the sake of this review, I have him wearing his and the other set. Where did I get the other set from? And this is how I usually have him displayed. I got the other set from an old Resaurus Charlie figure. So here you can see both dog tags. You can see they're slightly different. Charlie's are bigger, and it works. It works so well because it's for real. And so that way you can have him continue his homeboy's legacy and then create his own legacy, in the shadow of his homeboy, or in the memory of his homeboy. 80s action heroes tend to always have that revenge-driven plot situation, and since Guile is kind of a homage to that sort of thing, you get to relive that here, and it's perfect. I can't ask for anything really that much more, except maybe butterfly joints and a actual sonic boom, the spinning throw, the disc sonic boom effect. But yeah, that's Guile. All right, now let's talk about Adon, or Adon, as people like to call him. This dude was pretty cool because he was like a nice change from Sagat. He's not huge, he's a little smaller, he's agile. He's also a throwback to Street Fighter, to the very first Street Fighter, which was pretty dope. They did do things to kind of like amp up his style with the anatomy, which is what's lacking from today's designs. But yeah, he was a really dope figure. I made some like alterations to him because the plastic tassels on his armbands fell off with heat, over time. So I put cloth there instead. And the cloth, it's not going to melt. The connection points aren't going to fall off. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to stand up better. But his posability is awesome. He has such a nice range of motion. Probably in his hips, they could have done a little bit better, but you can still really, get some good poses out of him. He can do his Jaguar tooth. He can do the, Jaguar kick, the knee, all of that stuff. So, it works. Now his accessories are real simple. He's got a thumbs up or thumbs down, depending on what you want to use it for. He's got fists, and then he's got his old school, younger head. Thumbs down is perfect because, that's one of his victories. It fits perfectly. Again, these characters are much like Figuarts in that whatever they did in their game and their appearance in the game, they tried to, Macaluso tried to make them able to do that as figures. You can see he looks really good with this alternate head, and I love that. There's just so much character. That's the thing that's lacking from a lot of more expensive modern figures is there's no character. This guy's got a shit ton of character, and you just can't ignore it. That's in part due to the impeccable designs from Capcom. And at this era, in this era, they were on the very tip top of their game. So, he's one of the things that kind of made Alpha shine. He's a nice opponent with a weird, different kind of style. And it's dope to have him in figure form, and he can hit all the notes that he hits in the game. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, he's dope. All right, let's talk about Gen. Now, Gen here is one of those characters from the Alpha series. He popped up in Alpha 2. I never thought I would see a figure of this dude. So when he popped up as one of the characters they got to in this line, I was geeked because I'm like, yo, old school Kung Fu movie heads love this design. We love this look for the old master, from like the White Lotus to the kid with the golden arms, Shaolin versus Wu-Tang. We love that look, that traditional Kung Fu master look. He is all hands and just one extra head. And he's very posable, which is pretty awesome, which you could see from that last image. And for the old man of the bunch, that's pretty dope. You can have him looking like an old man, but you can also have him being very formidable with the type of hands that he was given, with the type of poses you can achieve with these hands. The hands do a lot, especially since he was a character who had two styles in the game. So you could switch between crane, and this looks really good. I love the fact that even though he has that rubberish, part of his tunic, he still can do the crane stance. And then he does Mantis. This is a crane strike, though. This is from one of his moves. He rolls and then gets up and pokes you. And then there's the Mantis stance. So, yeah, it's nice to see that they gave us the ability to do these things because, like I said, this line is all about the characters doing, the toys doing the things that their character in the game actually did. I mean, that's all you could ask for from this guy. And here's the alternate head with that smug face as he strokes his beard. You really can't ask for much more, He wasn't a particular favorite, but I love fighting him. And, he fits in perfectly with the rest of the guys. You know what I'm saying? All right. Balrog. This dude here. This is one of those figures that, really, really shows the amount of, character and the heft that this line brings with a lot of the figures. This dude's big, and he's solid. And, even in comparison to some of the newer big figures, which I'll show you, I guess I should say newer medium build, because he's big, but he's not the biggest. He's not T-Hawk big, but he's close. He just looks the part perfectly. He's posable enough to pull off the moves from the game, and he looks good doing it. And they managed to capture both looks, the alpha look and the super, the regular Street Fighter II or Super Street Fighter era look as well. And, it works. It works so well, you know what I mean? Having him alongside the other bosses, it looks really great. And then the fact that right now, Figuarts and Storm Collectibles have made the other guys, but they haven't made Balrog. He still fits in perfectly. So if you ever can get your hands on this guy for a decent price, he will still stand the test of time and look good with whatever group of, the generals you put him with. Here's his alternate head. You can see he looks just like they drew him in Alpha. I don't really like this head because it looks too caricature-ish. And I'm not going to get all, into the portrayals of race in video games, but I hate that. But he is kind of a brute, and he is a thug, so it's on point, for the type of character he is. But you can have the actions and, not necessarily make the character look stereotypical. But I think that's what they ended up going for when they weren't allowed to use Mike Tyson's likeness. Here he is compared to Luke Cage. Now, the more MCU focused figures are always smaller than your comic book ones. So here's Hercules, who's bigger, and even compared to Hercules, who's like probably the best example of a medium build, like larger character, and he still is hulking compared to this guy. And I love it. I love it. I love it. And you can see the articulation is there. He doesn't have double jointed elbows though, which would have been a nice thing to give him. But like I said, his accessories are just the alternate head, and then he has wrapped hands, which is dope because in the movie, the '97 anime, he fought in fatigues, like the upper portion of his boxing gear, fatigues, military boots, and then wraps, which is nice because under the gloves you got wraps anyway. If anyone who's boxed or done any type of martial arts and you have to wear boxing gloves, that's a mainstay, and that's awesome to have. I remember when I was younger, when I first had him, me and my younger brother played with him and the cops were going after him because we always made him like a weapons and drugs smuggler, and like that's what he handled for Shadowlaw, and him and Bulletproof had a really dope fight. Sounds funny, but they had a really dope fight because we always made Bulletproof kind of like a taekwondo, like a Hong Kong martial arts style kicker. But anyway, this figure is amazing. You know, it's just like exactly what you want from this line. You know what I'm saying? It's what you want from a figure line based on video games, and it encapsulates all the character that these guys are supposed to have. So, you know, you can't go wrong if you find this dude for a decent price. All right, let's talk about Sakura. Sakura is really nice. I love this design. She came a lot later, especially for me. I didn't get all these guys in order. Some of them I had to hunt down afterwards, but I got her and Balrog like when they were released, and it was nice because like she's smaller, she's got a lot of the posability, she's a happier character, so it's a whole different vibe from Balrog or from some of the other guys. And then she came with all the stuff that was necessary to recreate her victories and everything from the game. And then it really highlighted the fact that this character is just, you know, it's a schoolgirl Ryu. You know, like you can tell she's imitating her idol. The way that they captured all that stuff is pretty well done. I had some issues though during the review when I tried to switch her head. It broke. I had to get the neck peg out and then replace the neck peg to get her to, you know, be able to continue with the review. So that's something to look out for because this is an old figure. So if you do play with them, take heed. But, you know, I was able to fix it. It's not something too bad. You could use a peg from like old G.I. Joes, like, you know, I'm sorry, not G.I. Joes, but Vitruvian hacks, and it'll fit. And some of your Gundam pegs work too. But anyway, her articulation is spot on. You can do all of her attacks. You can do her victories. She's pretty well balanced. There's a lot of moves that, you know, I didn't really need much to get her posed in order to like hold her up to do her kicks and things like that. So, I mean, she's just a well done figure like everything else I've gone over so far. Paint, no issues. You know what I mean? Range of motion, no issues. Fragility, overall, no issues. I will say some of the connection points, whenever they have like removable hands or a removable head, they fit really tightly on some figures. Than other figures, it's perfect. So that's where you have to be careful. And I should have heated her up and then popped the, you know, the thing off, popped the head off. But I was like, you know, I was anxious and I was in the middle of the review. So I was like, let me not stop. Let me just keep going. But her accessories are dope. So she has her school bag, and then everything that you see outside of her hands and that sneaker, the two books and the camera, fit inside the book bag, which I thought was awesome. So you can have her with her one strap over her shoulder holding her book bag, and there's actual shit that she would be using in school in the book bag. The extra shoe, I wish that they had given her like a removable foot that's just got the sock on, you know, so you could replace that one foot, because she had a victory when she kicked the shoe flew off and hit her on the head. But there's the book bag open, and you can see there's plenty of space. You can kind of fit a little bit more than just what the three items that are typically in there. But she's a winner, man. They did a really great job recreating all the things, that make up her character in the series. All right, round 4. This was an awesome wave because I'm a fan of just about everybody in it. Some of these less than others, but they gave me some that I really wanted, like Remy. Remy, he's one of my favorite dudes because he is a flash kicker, a charge character in the vein of Guile and Charlie. And since they didn't give us a Charlie figure when I saw they gave us Remy, he's from my favorite Street Fighter game of all time. I was like, yo, I'm there. Some people don't like him. He's emo. He's one of those kind of B-show designs, and he's very much inspired by Iori Yagami, who was a big one of my favorites when I was a kid, like younger, getting into all this stuff. And you can see there's cues. You know what I mean? They just, instead of giving him a white shirt, they gave him blue hair with that white tint to it that usually is used for shadows. It's a cool color on white. But yeah, this figure's really well done, really posable. He's well balanced. For the sake of the review, when I was taking pictures, I didn't just spend the time forcing the balance, but you can easily have him balance on one leg. You can see that like he actually can take the positions from the poses from the game, just like everybody else. It feels like I'm repeating myself, but this is one of those things where they just do what they're supposed to do. He doesn't come with very many accessories, just one Sonic Boom type hand and effect, the extra fist hands, and then the extra head with the windswept hair. I couldn't really complain. There wasn't much else to give him. I kind of do wish that the Sonic Boom hands also had the projectile, kind of like what the Figuarts figures did. But he's just so simple. Sonic Boom, a lot of the flash kick characters, the charge type characters, are really simple in their approach. You don't really need too much to get them to do the things that they do. So yeah, as long as he's posable, as long as he looks the part, and as long as you have, the alternate pieces to kind of get the attitude across, that's all you need. And this guy does that shit in spades. So I'm cool with this. You know what I mean? Remy is dope. Moving along, let's get to Ibuki. Now, Ibuki was never one of my favorite characters. I like her fighting style in the game. She's a ninja. Ninjas are cool. That's a fact. But this figure, even though it does some of the things I want, because she's the wrong height for the character, she's always been small and compact. She should be closer in height to Sakura. She's on the small side. She should be the smallest character in the line. That, coupled with some of the QC issues I had with her, made her not very fun. So you can see there's a crack on the crotch, and that crack made her legs go like slack really fast. I think you can see it a little bit closer here. And I take it from multiple angles so you could tell. But even still, she's still very posable and everything, but that shit, all I could do is kind of like be really, careful with moving her to make sure that doesn't crack any further. Her accessories are just a couple hands, her kunai dagger that she's holding, and then a lowered kind of scarf so that you can see her face. And I went through a couple things with her. Like I tried to customize her hair because her hair was too tall, so sometimes it would get in the way. So I tried using different materials to just imitate that. And then in the end, I just glued back on her ponytail. But you can see her face now. That was her victory in the game. Those hands double as her like ninja magic, hands. And then she has the holding things hands for her kunai. She's an okay figure. She's just not at all my favorite of the line. She's not really that amazing. Now, Fei Long, on the other hand, is a very, very awesome figure. For a long time, it was cool because there wasn't a good Bruce Lee figure out there. There were the ones done by Art Asylum, and they were okay, but the likenesses were always off. And this one he scratched that itch. He was posable. He had the attitude and everything. I mean, even though you know he's a separate character, you still could play those Bruce Lee-ish kind of moments with him, you know? So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this guy. I ended up buying him twice because I got the Alpha default colors, which is gray, and then I got the Super Street Fighter default colors, which was black. And you know that the black pants, just seeing this image, Bruce Lee 100%. You know, it's making you feel that Bruce Lee-ism, you know, 100%. So yeah, I was super happy. And you know I'm a huge fan of Bruce Lee. His accessories are really simple. A couple of hands, you know, fists, open hands that also serve as the holding things hands for his nunchucks. He's got a pointing thing hand, he's got the nunchucks, and then he's got his open mouth face. Now, his accessories pretty much only work for him and smaller figures. So those nunchucks, there is a little space in his hands, like a, I don't know, recess in his hands that you can slide the nunchucks into behind his thumb, and they just fit in there perfectly so that he can hold it using his thumbs and that recess, and then you can pose him accordingly, you know. And then his fist hands, of course, you know, they're fist hands. You can do a whole lot with those fist hands. He just looks the part. You know, that's what makes me happy, is when I'm goofing off and I can make them look the part. I can make them do the things that I made them do in the game with the figure. And I keep going back to this because so many figures that come out in the years after this line can't do all the things. You know how many Spider-Man figures can't cop a squat, and you got all these tutorials on how to expand their range of motion and shit. Meanwhile, this figure does everything it's supposed to do. All these figures pretty much do what they're supposed to do. So that goes a long way for me in loving this line and giving props to this line. So Fei Long is a winner. Everything about him works really well. He's very posable. The range of motion is good, and he just looks the part. This guy here, man, I didn't know how much I wanted a figure like this until I got him. Birdie, I was actually considering skipping him. And then when I saw him in person, I was like, yo, I need to, let me take a look at this figure. And I was pleasantly surprised. For a figure of this size, he's extremely posable. He's got his signature build, not that bullshit that they did to him in Street Fighter V. And this reflects the character as you saw him in the Alpha series. He's actually even a little bit more stylized in line with artwork that we saw of the character years ago. And I love it. I love it. I love the way he's got that slouched posture. I love the fact that he's still a huge fucking figure, you know? Hasbro would charge you $40 for this figure today. You know what I mean? For any of these big guys, $40 for them, because they're just a head and shoulders, or sometimes two heads and shoulders taller than, you know, the standard medium-sized figures. And this guy, he just doesn't disappoint, man. Like, all the character is there, all the details are there. The real chain is a nice touch. The comb, I love the comb, the knife comb. Although I would have chosen better materials, but I understand budget constraints and such. And that's why we got what we got. I mean, the hole in his mohawk, you know what I mean? Like, shit, it's just so well done. Even the heart tattoo on the top of his head. I mean, you can see some dust on my guy because he's been sitting, but look at the rings. The detail on the rings. The little alien on the one ring, the little stud on the smaller ring next to his index finger, then all of these on his other hand. It's just insane, and it's consistent across all of the alternate hands. Like, we don't get this level of detail, but we pay way more for figures now. You know what I mean? There's figures that you get from, you know, from Hasbro and from others that just don't go this far. You know, some of them go farther, I'm not gonna lie, but a lot of domestic figures don't do this. The comb, it actually flipped in and out, but it broke when he fell off of my shelf one time. I glued it back with Gorilla Glue, and it hasn't been an issue since. But it's something you would have to look out for. They're made of very flimsy, NECA-like material, and you don't want that shit to, you know, bend, or if you put too much force on it, it'll break, you know? Again, a belt buckle that's highly detailed, well painted. You don't get silver paint everywhere else. And the belt itself looks like leather, just like his shoes. His socks are even showing through the top of the shoes. You know what I mean? Just little details that make this shit look extra good. I mean, look at the texturing done on his jeans. It's just so nice, man. It's so well done. And like I said, this guy was like 15 bucks or so. The chain, dude's mustache, you know, like these shapes that are being added to these figures are not traditional shapes that you see on standard characters. You know what I mean? A lot of standard design is boring in comparison, but these interesting shapes being put on these characters build up a really nice form. The thumbs up looks really good. You can also, of course, do, you know, other things with that hand, like the thumbs down, like in his victory. But I mean, look at his face too, which brings me to his alternate head, because that was also another accessory. You can do the thumbs down if you want to, and it looks right. Not to mention the real chain that you saw when, you know, on his introduction picture. So Birdie is all win. You can have a lot of fun with this guy, and he's really tough, man. Other than the comb, I've never had any issues with this guy. And now comes the big daddy King Dingling himself, Shin Akuma. Now, I was never able to find standard Akuma for a good price, and I always preferred Shin Akuma, so I got this figure instead. And essentially, he is the base that they got to build the Revolution Ken and Ryu, and then another Akuma. He's bigger in size and shape and everything than standard Akuma. I mean standard Ken and Ryu, and he's just as posable though. He still can't do the standard fireball like they do, but I'll do a side by side so you can see him, and you can see that they're like roughly the same height. Akuma's a little bigger or taller, but the musculature, there's a huge difference. Look at those arms. Akuma's much bigger than him. Same thing with his thighs and everything else. Accessory wise, he only comes with extra hands, open hands. You see him posed here to do that one extra super, the Geese Howard style super that most people don't know he has in Street Fighter III. I would have put that hand on there, but they're kind of hard to remove in order to put the other hands on. So I was like, you know, for the sake of speed, I won't do that. But yeah, overall, I mean, he's really dope. I mean, he's really strong looking, really has the essence of the design down. And then that musculature really lends itself to giving you the feel that this is Akuma. He is, you know, King Dingaling of the Street Fighter universe, and it works. But there's one other character left that was kind of an like a bonus character. And we're going to jump into him really quickly because he would be the final character in the line. And he's kind of like, I didn't know he existed until I like ran across him while getting some of the last bunch of characters I got at a convention. And who am I talking about other than Gouken himself? And that's Ken and Ryu's master. This is one version of him. I think at the time, this is what he looked like in the comics. Adon was making Street Fighter comics at the time, and I want to say this was an exclusive figure. I can't remember if he was a Toy Fair exclusive. I can't remember where he was exclusive to, but I'll put it up here. But as you can see, he uses the same body as Akuma, which later on went on to be used for the Street Fighter Revolution figures. Just about everything is the same. It's just that there are small differences. He doesn't have anything on his back. He's got the rope belt. And I think they did another version of him that he didn't have his mouth open. I never saw that one in person. If I did, I would have gotten him because he looks like a straight savage, and we all know that's not Gouken's personality. He's kind of tranquil and chill, but there's more details on the differences between him and Akuma. You can see that he's got wraps on his arms or his wrists and his shins. Got the same kind of slippers or sandals as Gouken, or as Goki or Akuma. He only came with this weird fire effect that's too small to actually fit on his hand. I don't know if it shrunk over time. I don't know if this is the wrong fire piece. I'm pretty sure this is the fire piece that came with him because I keep all the stuff together. I don't get it. I never was able to use this with him. I always used it for other characters. So I kind of think it was just thrown in there as like an extra piece, just to give him an accessory. But, he's not a bad figure at all. It's a good way to reuse parts to make a character who technically would be, if following the logic of Ken and Ryu and Akuma, he would be a palette swap, or a head swap. So yeah, that's Gouken, and Gouken was a nice way to wrap this all up. And I ended up getting him before I finished the whole thing. But there you have it. That is my redux of the SOTA Street Fighter action figure line. Those are all the characters. It's one of the few lines that I managed to collect everybody. I'm not missing anyone. For those who want to be smartasses, they're gonna say, "Oh, where's E Honda, Zangief, Armika, and Dalsim?" Those were all part of Street Fighter Revolution, which didn't make sense. SOTA changed hands, and then they tried to kind of like restart the line but finish off what was done. And yeah, they weren't as cool as the figures that I got, you know what I mean? And there were a lot of QC issues. I'm pretty sure they changed the plastics used. So this is where it's at. There were many colors, many different styles for a lot of these characters, and many people tried to collect every single color that was offered for each character. It's unnecessary. Some of the colors don't look as good. I mean, straight up, they just don't. Personally, I was always, all about the player one colors. It doesn't matter what game I'm playing. The original design, the original colors were always what appealed to me, so that's what I collected for this line. I think I did a good job. I think I managed to get all the ones I wanted, and I like the way they look. I mean, just in terms of capturing the essence of the artwork that makes this game unique. Capcom at their finest, or makes these games unique. Capcom at their height, the golden age of Capcom. This stuff is immaculate. The new figures kind of have the look, but there's something missing with the newer designs. It's why I wasn't so sad when I saw that Figuarts was doing the more classic renditions of the characters, even though it said Street Fighter V on the box. Because if you look at the designs, the Street Fighter V designs for a lot of the classic characters are pretty much the same. It's a gift and a curse, you know what I mean? You want evolution, and then at the same time you had a fan base crying out for the same old stuff. So to give everybody what they were asking for, Capcom just didn't stray too far from the classic designs, for those characters. But all in all, this has been fun to do. I'm glad that Zorpox asked for this. And, it's nice to go back and look at stuff that you have, stuff from a time gone by that doesn't get the love that it deserves. And then also, unlike many of the newer attempts at Street Fighter, look how many characters got made. Most characters can't make it past like the first handful of characters. I mean, I think Storm hasn't really made that many characters. They've just made tons of versions of Ken and Ryu. They've done Guile. They did a version of Cammy, like the alternate version of Cammy and the alternate version of Chun-Li. They also did the standard Chun-Li. I'm pretty sure they did did I say Zangief already? They did Zangief, E Honda, Chun-Li, Cammy, Ken and Ryu, and Guile. Oh, and Bison. And I think that's it so far. And it's been how many years? Oh, and Sagat. I forgot they did a Sagat figure. But everything else, like Akuma, is just a head swap. And they've done so many versions of Ken and Ryu. So many versions, just like with the ninjas, So I wish that a company that was as, fast moving as Hasbro. I know Hasbro's huge. I mean, they're number one when it comes to, they're the biggest toy company in the world right now. But I wish that, you know, the kind of speed that they're popping out Marvel Legends, I wish somebody domestic would be able to jump in and do the same thing. Be it Mattel, be it Hasbro themselves, you know, whoever, but someone would pick up this line and just churn out the figures, you know what I mean? Because there's so many characters to make and they never get to all of them. Nobody has done all four of the new challengers from the 90s, which is sad because there's new characters that popped up in Street Fighter 4, and some of them are worth making. You know, NECA made a Sea Viper figure, but that's it. They didn't do any of the others. Not to say that we need them, I'm just saying the last time we got new characters, we only got one of them, you know, and the rest were kind of whack to begin with. You know, I'm sure that's why they didn't do them. But here, just about everyone was handled with so much gusto, man, and like the amount of quality that's sitting here in front of you, it's mind-numbing, you know, because we just don't get this anymore, you know. Sometimes when we get a ton of figures, the quality is meh, or they're characters from the most recent iteration of whatever it is that we're looking at. This here, you have characters that had popped up in the old Street Fighter games like Street Fighter II and Super Street Fighter. You had characters from Street Fighter Alpha, and you had characters from Street Fighter 3. If I have a criticism, it's the fact that they didn't just start with like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, do all those characters, that's 17 characters, then move on and do Street Fighter Alpha and do the characters who are specific to Alpha, then move on, then do the characters that were specific to Street Fighter 3. I think that would have been a better strategy, but I did hear in interviews that with Jerry Macaluso that Capcom was very specific in the characters that he could do at what time, so they kind of gave him like a pool of characters to work on, and he couldn't really deviate from that. He had to work within those confines. And I've heard that Capcom is notoriously difficult to work with when they outsource. So, you know, given what he was given to do or to work with, he did a great job. You know, I can't really complain about that stuff. And, you know, I collect the figures. A lot of these guys, though, if you're trying to get them now on the secondary, they go for stupid prices. You know, they go for, you know, 50, 60 bucks a piece to a couple $100 a piece, depending on the figure, you know. Sometimes the cheaper figures will be the colors that nobody wanted. But anyway, this a big shout out to Jerry Macaluso. Dude, you're the man. I would love to chat with you about figures and sculpting and everything. And you know, for everybody else out there, this is just a look at the history of, you know, a line that doesn't get the love it deserves. Just because there's new and shiny shit doesn't mean that things weren't done right in the past. And in a landscape of people who are stuck on nostalgia, I think this line needs a little bit more respect on its name. And that's why I decided that I'm gonna go back and do this, because I love this line. A lot of the things that I love about action figures are present right here. Shit, everything I love about action figures is present here. Awesome style that doesn't look like everything else, accessories, articulation, and then just overall uniqueness. You know, there's some joints here that to some you might say they're ugly, but I think they're not any uglier than some of the other joints that we see that are, you know, kind of popular, that have been popularized over the years. You know, I'm not a fan of the ankle swivel that you see on a lot of Hasbro figures because of the way that they don't couple it with ankle joint. But here you have a unique looking unique swivel with the ankle joint on every figure. There's a lot to learn, you know what I mean? So for people who are aspiring to make figures, this is a good line to look at. For people who just, you know, you just like action figures, you know, if you can find these guys, and I said it before, and I'm just gonna keep saying it, if you can find them for a good price, a reasonable price, jump on it. Don't pay scalper prices, and these are old figures, so reasonable is relative, you know. But yeah, that is my look at the SOTA Street Fighter line from SOTA Toys. This is one of my favorite lines of all time, and I am sticking to that. It's not going to change. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. Zorpox, thank you for suggesting I go back over this stuff. And yeah, I hope you guys dug the video. As always, I hope you watched the whole thing. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know the drill by now. And yeah, I will catch you guys on the next video. That is it for me. You have been great. Peace outside.
We await your return, warrior.